Hi there. My name is Newo, and I am a techno artist, DJ, studio guy from Los Angeles. And I'm here today to show you guys some insight on my workflow. Now, I've had conversations with people in the warehouse raves and just the scene, quote unquote. And, the question always comes up, how do you make music? What program do you use? And whenever I say Pro Tools, people look at me with, I don't know, it just something's off. So then the question comes up like, well, what do you use in Pro Tools? And it's like, well, I don't use MIDI. Um, and so then that's something I always end up trying to explain, but I figure I should just show you guys kind of how I came up with my process for making minimal techno specifically. So for sake of example today, I'll be walking you through this track, which is off of my new release, Techno Mixtape 2. And this one is called Kashyyyk or Kashyyyk. I don't know. I was watching Star Wars when I made it, so figured why not. Anyways, here we go. Right. So as you hear, it's kind of got like just that bouncy, minimal kind of vibe. So let's go ahead and hide that and make it inactive. Oh, quick note. So for this one, um, this is the master of the track. And one thing I'll be explaining throughout the tutorial is I mix my tracks analog on a console. So when I'm making things in Pro Tools, I'm kind of making it with like taking that Pro Tools session to the studio in mind. So there'll be tracks that are like pretty raw without a lot of processing. And some of that is just because I like to either finalize it on the console or use outboard gear. Um, and on top of that, the studio, the room is just calibrated so you can get a better idea of how it's going to bounce and how the sub is going to work and all that. So let's go ahead and hide that and make it active. And that's also one feature I love about Pro Tools. You can like have stuff that you can render and keep off to the side. And I know you can do that in other programs. I don't know, the workflow here is something I fell in love with. Um, so let's start, I guess, from the top. Here's the kick drum. The kick drum is just going to be, I have different ways of doing kick drums. Sometimes I'll layer them with like, a sub layer and a mid layer and then like a top little kind of click and use different types of compression, distortion, and harmonic generation, I guess, and layer those together and then print those. But for this one, I don't know. I had this kick drum that I got from a cool website, which you guys should check out. It's called freesound.org. And I just really liked the way that it sounded. So I figured it was something I could, because it had a good starting point, I could just finish mixing it in the studio. And so that's why you'll see here, I just have really just a high pass on it. And when I took it to the studio, usually on my kick drums, I kind of have the same formula for when I'm actually there. And what I'll do is the distressor. So the distressor it's kind of like a compressor, but it just has like gives it some knock, I guess. And then there's a really cool plugin called Decapitator, and that's like a distortion plugin, and you can just blend that in. And then, of course, the actual console itself, the EQs on those are great. Um, and then, here and there, sometimes like I think on this track, yeah, so like on the sub, I actually ran a guitar pedal in the studio on that. But even then, I think it was at like, I don't know, 5 or 10%, and maybe even less. It was barely in there, just enough to get some like top out of the sub. So yeah, the kick drum also, I used it because it just so happened to be sitting at G sharp, which just kind of worked out for the track. Yeah, so really kind of boomy kick. Uh, One other thing I should show you. I always have my kick drums like kind of on the shorter side, usually around an eighth note. And I mean, for anyone who's like obsessed with dead mouse, you kind of know about this. Um, just those shorter kick drums allow you to have room for your bass to breathe, I guess. Um, so now let's go on to the sub. And as far as the sub goes, it's really simple. So, one thing I do is like, let me go quickly to here. I mix with an analyzer. Um, and so the analyzer helps me just keep things coherent. Now, the sub, Pro Tools has a cool feature where you can go here to other and then signal generator. Um, so the sub is that's how I generated that is it's literally just a sine wave. With some distortion. This lo-fi plugin is one of the stock Pro Tools plugins, and it just for some reason it's like so simple, but it's so effective. I always find with this plugin the distortion on here has just such a cool tone, and then the saturation it kind of like darkens things. So those two on the sub worked really nicely, and then I have a guitar pedal plugin, and I did do a real guitar pedal on it for the final mix. But what's cool about this plugin is yeah, so that's at 0. And even if you just throw it on at 0, it actually adds character. So then I just kind of took the mix back a little bit. And that was it. And so the sub, you'll see it kind of comes like in between the kicks. And I guess it's like every other kick. So then we have more room for things to breathe. So now let's go to the toms. And wherever they are. Yeah, so also sometimes like when I'm producing, I'll leave a tom or just any clip really, and I'll kind of see how it sounds in certain parts, and then I'll just end up muting it, just to for the arrangement, just to have things coming in at the right time. So, oh, I guess I should show you the sub real quick. I don't know if you can even hear that. Yeah. So, Tom 1, I'm pretty sure this is just a sample. Excuse me. Yeah. So, that one, I mean, same process with the sub. I just mixed it analog. And even then, it's not like I'm doing anything crazy. It's usually just like a little EQ boost or cut here and there. And then I'm trying to remember. I don't even think I really did anything on the tom. The tom kind of sounded good how it was. Oh, another thing on the sub. I'm kind of all over the place here, but on the sub, to keep things moving, what I'll do sometimes is I'll do the verify audio suite plugin. So it's like a tape stop. I guess in FL Studio it'd be like gross beats. But I do that because I'll play these together. It kind of adds like it's very subtle, but it's just enough of a pitch change that there is some variation. And minimal techno, it's all about like very subtle tonal differences, I guess. So yeah, the tom with all those, with the tom with the kick and the sub. So you kind of start to get that like push pull. And then there's another tom, and that one I think it's muted here, but it does come in. And the only thing on that one is I have this wider plugin, and so this plugin's cool because, and you'll see this throughout a lot of my productions. I just fell in love with how this thing sounds. It's also a free plugin, so shout out to Polyverse and Infected Mushroom. What I'll do oftentimes with drums is you'll see like the kick and the sub and the lower tom, those are all mono. And you always want to keep your bass in mono pretty much, just to keep things balanced, especially on a larger system. But then to add some variation, I'll do usually like one of the toms in stereo, and I'll make it like crazy stereo. See, it's all over 100% on there. And so that just kind of adds like, it just, I guess, I don't know, keeps things interesting. So let's hear that. Let's hear all those together. And that one is like a higher register too. So that this little guy cuts through the mix a little more than some of those other toms. Um, so now let's see. Okay, so the clap. That's one thing I did want to talk about. Um, so earlier I mentioned for my kick drums, I'll sometimes like layer things. Um, and I'll do the same for the clap. And sometimes I go completely down the rabbit hole regarding the clap. Like I'll just I'll have like 18 samples that I'm trying to layer together or something. So then I have to like narrow it down. So let's go ahead and make these active. And I guess let's just go through them one by one. And you'll notice these are stereo as well. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But so the first one would just be, wait, can we even hear that? Oh no, hold on. I gotta reroute these because see how they're going to the clap print channel to here. So let's just put those to the stereo out real quick. Yeah, cool. So let's hear this one. Yeah, so that's like just like a little click, I guess. And then this one, it's more body to it. And that first one is just completely raw, but this one, same thing. I have the distortion cranked up, and you'll see this plug in a lot through my process. And then just a little bit of a transient shaper. This one's made by Waves. It's called Smack Attack. It's really cool. Um, and I've noticed like when you crank Smack Attack, it like kind of distorts the sound, even if you don't have that on clip or whatever, but it sounds kind of nice. And as long as your levels are cool, like you'll notice this one, it's at like -11. So as long as you have enough headroom, you're actually fine. Um, anyways, let's go down to this one. And again, same distortion on there. Yeah, so that one's like, that's not as much of a transient, but that's more to just give it body, I guess. Now this one, also completely raw. And then this last one. So then all those together, let's solo all those. So even then, I still, did some mixing on the actual clap. So I guess let's just kind of make those inactive for now. And then let's go to the actual clap print. So those, what I did is I printed those, and then I threw the same Smack Attack, and it's just adding a little bit of snap to it. So then you get and now for minimal techno, I like to add a reverse clap sometimes. And sometimes I get carried away with this. It's actually better to do it so that it's like barely there. It's kind of like you want it to be noticeable once you mute it, but like when it's actually in the mix, it doesn't need to be that crazy. Um, and that just sounds like this. It's just kind of like a white noise sample. Or I guess it's from a pack, but it normally plays the other way, and I had reversed it. And then that one has the channel strip plugin, but really just adding like some 10K little boost, and then I think just some volume adjustment. So then let's hear those all together. Let's hear the drums all together. Tom 1, sub, kick. So then here's what we end up with. Okay. Now let's go to the hi-hats. Right? Yeah, they're somewhere. And the hi-hats are something that are really simple. I use a plugin called Boom. And so this is a stock Pro Tools instrument. And I guess let me just make that active real quick. On slow tools. Okay, so boom is just this. It's just like a really simple drum machine. It has like 808, 909 kind of stuff. Very straightforward. And then that one, same thing. I just love how this sounds, so I print it into that, the distortion. Um, but let's make that inactive. Um, so hi-hat 1 is coming from the boom, and it's really simple. A little bit more distortion, a little bit of compression to just tame those, like, I guess, crunchy parts, but also to keep some of those hi-hats in within range, the more open ones. And then just a little bit of EQ. And then this is something I also added with the console. Just, I think I boosted certain frequency ranges. Like I probably boosted the mid range on it. And then I have a second hi-hat, but it's really just the same hat. It's an emphasis of the same hat. And I don't even know if it's really doing much. It kind of just adds some weight to it, I guess. But yeah, the hi-hats, nothing crazy. I lately with hi-hats and my tracks, I don't really do too much with hi-hats. Like a simple, eighth note hi-hat is really all I need. Sometimes some shuffled hi-hats, but even then, I don't know. I'm just not like crazy. One thing that's kind of helped me develop my style is I try and steer away from like unnecessary use of hi-hats and claps. I don't know why. I maybe because the type of techno I got into didn't have a lot of claps, like a lot of that old school minimal, like '04 kind of stuff. It's more about like weird sounds than just rhythmic clapping. But anyways, let's hear all that together. So now that's kind of a groove that we have going. So usually when I'm starting tracks, I'll try and build the drums first and just get a groove going. So now let's kind of get to the more interesting part. So I make the lead synth, or I guess lead bass, whatever you want to call it. I do that out of a sine wave. And well, how do I do that? Let's kind of break this down. So make this active. And what you'll see is I have these inactive versions of the same synth because I'll like print things and then add more and then reprint it, partially because I'm out of room for plugins. And let's go ahead and make that active too. So this one is printing into this one, which is then printing into this lead. And even then, the lead one is edited. So the first iteration of this synthesizer, because that's really what it just ends up becoming, it's a synth. So let's go ahead and solo that and take off all the plugins, right? So now it's literally just, if you zoom in enough, it's just a sine wave. And same thing, I made that with the signal generator. Just typing in the same frequency that the kick was sitting at, so G sharp. And that's where an analyzer really comes in handy, is just to like double check that your I guess your math is adding up. So now I start with the sine wave. And the first thing I usually add is this specific plugin, because I really like how the distortion sounds on it. So now it's really just a square wave. And I guess I could start by printing a square wave, but I've noticed if I'm squaring it from distortion, I have a little more control over the actual tone of it. And after trying different distortion plugins for the initial character of the sound, I don't know, I like how this one sounds. So we start with that, and then this is a plugin that I really love, which is Filter Freak by Sound Toys. So what this is, it's something that I just kind of, I like filter free because you can just add stuff in for movement. And so it's just sweeping up, I guess, every eighth note. The other thing about Filter Freak is the distortion within it is really cool. So sometimes I'll use like the Dirt one or Squash or Op Amp. It just, these have different characters to them. So you can already hear there is some movement going on. But obviously, that can't just be the whole sound. So again, I love Filter Freak. We added another Filter Freak to it. And you'll start to hear. And same process. This one, I guess it's just kind of doing the opposite. Let's see. Yeah. So like this one, the first one goes up, this one goes down, which already just kind of keeps the sound interesting. And then the third one, I'm not even going to cap on this one. The third one, I don't know how much it's actually doing. I think I added it, if I remember, just because I liked the color that it added through the internal distortion. But obviously it is doing some movement. It kind of darkens it a little bit. So that's kind of like the basis of the sound. And then this is where a lot of the movement also comes in. So the filter gate is a stock Pro Tools plugin. And I think I actually was just going through presets. So I'll usually with these, I'll start with a preset and then, just start tweaking from there. And so what this one is doing, and you'll kind of see the automation correspond, is so it's essentially just doing a 16th note gate. And you'll see I have the swing automated. Oh yeah, and the hold, the gate hold, so like just to keep it moving. But yeah, a lot of the actual sound comes from this plugin after those initial Filter Freak plugins. So then from there, just some compression. Very light. You'll see, 1.7 -2. It's just catching those peaks. And the arc compressor is something I use a lot. It just sounds really clean. And then another arc compressor, and this one is going to the sidechain bus. And then again, the same lo-fi plugin. This thing goes crazy. Now, the only difference with this one is, yes, there is distortion on it, but if we go, so this automation lane here for noise. Now, I know I said earlier there's only 2 hi-hats, but there are 3 hi-hats on this track, and one of those hi-hats comes from the noise playing off of the swing. And so you'll hear that. And so I think I turned that up by accident, and I just loved the way it sounded. And that's also a big part of my process is just trying things, and if something accidentally sounds good, it's like, okay, let's build from that, because at the end of the day, music is just a feeling, right? So if it feels good, then just rock with it. Okay, now to further develop this sound, I added the lo-fi plugin, which I know that this one says lo-fi, but then this one also says lo-fi. So these are just 2 different versions essentially of the same plugin, except this one has a little more options, like you have your LFOs, envelope modulation, distortion. This one though, I like the sample rate reduction. And this one has that too. If you turn off the anti-alias, it does have that. It just doesn't sound as good. So this one, you'll see. I don't know why we didn't hear that, but yeah. Oh, we didn't hear it because it's fucking bypassed. Jesus Christ. So yeah, that one's fun to automate. Sorry about that. And then the last one, just some EQ, right? Um, and then while I'm making the initial sound, I'll run it to my sends. But just for sake of example, I have those muted right now because I'll show you those in the final product. Okay, so now that we have that first version of that synth done, um, we print it. We print it into the next. Hold on. So I just print it into another channel. And the reason I do that is to free up computer space, because a lot of this automation and plugins, eats into the CPU. But B, I also I tend to edit my stuff after I'll print it. And so you'll even see like the last iteration of this is longer than this one. And even then there's an edit right there. Um, so it's just kind of still figuring out how I want it to not just sound, but also like when I want things to come in. So now if we go to that printed version of this, you start to hear that kind of lead synth sound. And usually once I get the raw concept down, when I print it, it's more just like things for taste. So like this, I think I literally just boosted a little bit on the top. But this Kramer channel strip, it's one of those plugins where even if you throw it on it, it does kind of add some character. It's not much, even if you don't adjust anything. But I don't know, it just sounds really good. Now the TDR Nova, I know in this specific instance, I'm not really using it how it's intended to because it is a multi-band compressor. I do use a lot of multi-band compression specifically with this plugin. It just depends on either the instrument or the actual track. But here I just have it doing a cut at 30 hertz. And I suppose I could have used another EQ, but I think when I initially put it on, I was going to do some multi-band compression, but then I was just like, fuck it, I'll do that on the console. Okay, so, and TDR Nova, that's actually a free plugin. So definitely check that one out. I use it in every mix. I even use it at the studio. And then a little bit more with the side chain. Again, nothing crazy though. Like I don't usually sidechain like hardcore just because I'm not into that like excessive pumping. And then here, yeah. So this is just a low cut that's automated. I'm pretty sure it comes in. Yeah, it comes in right there. Yeah. And I suppose I could have done that with this, but again, whatever. And then just a little bit of EQ, nothing crazy. So then that gets printed into this one. So let's unsolo that and make that inactive. Let's make this bigger. Okay, so another thing too is this initial one and well, these first two initial ones, those are mono, right? And then I printed that into stereo because I added some stereo stuff to it. But even then, the actual sound, it's pretty much mono. And on this synthesizer, the stereo stuff is more for like, it's more of like a rhythmic thing, if that makes sense. Like it'll rhythmically become stereo, certain parts of the track, like the kick will cut out or something, and it'll get bigger. So yeah, wider, right? So the width is automating. So like on the breakdown, it gets really big, and then on this specific drop, it gets like super minimal, and builds from there. Um, so the width is like very intentional, I guess. But anyways, so on this final version of it, well, it's not. I don't know if it's final, but it's because I still did some post processing. But uh, the ensemble plugin, that's a really cool plugin. So the automation lane would be here. And just the mix is going up. And that's similar to the wider plugin. It's just another form of stereo automation. Very little EQ adjustment there. Again, the Kramer, boosting 1.4 just a little bit. This one, what is this one doing? I think it's, I don't know, honestly. Oh, yeah. So I kind of had it like bandpassed, I guess, in the beginning, um, as for like I guess the mix in, and then yeah, like I said, the wider plugin. So then those are all going to these different auxes, and I have my lexicon, which is like a small reverb, and then the black hole is like a huge reverb, and that one's not going too much. A slap delay, which I guess is more of like a stereo thing than an actual delay. And the tape delay, you can already, I think you could hear that at one part. The tape delay, kind of like that classic dub delay. Yeah. And then this one is called lead thick, and I guess I should explain that. So I guess real quick, let's go down to the auxes. Yeah. So lead thick, right? Because that synthesizer is sending into here, and that this is another key part of the character of the sound. The enhancer, it's a really cool plugin. It just kind of it's like a harmonic generator kind of thing. It just changes the tone of things slightly. Um, and then a little EQ, because again this is running parallel, so see it's not as high of a volume, so it's more for like additional flavor to the sound. And then it's being pretty slammed, so it's like some parallel compression, TDR Nova, and this is a little bit of multi-band compression, partially just to let the mid-range sit a little cleaner. Again, wider, and then the Kramer, just boosting the top. And another reason I use the wider plugin a lot is it's mono compatible, so you don't end up with like massive phasing issues, as opposed to something like the Haas effect, or what's that Sound Toys plugin, Micro Shift. Like that one, if you use Micro Shift too much, you can get like things start to sound out of phase and like a comb filter almost. And then the slap delay, so that's just like a slapback delay. It's nothing crazy. Tape echo, literally just, I think it's literally the default setting on that plugin. And I think I took the mix and feedback up slightly. Again, that's running here to the wider, and then it's just cutting out the lows on there. Black Hole is a great plugin. For some reason, whenever I use it, I always use the cathedral setting. I start with that. Oh, and actually, I should mention that. So there's a portion of the track where there's like this air sucking in kind of noise. And real quick, let me unsolo that. So you'll hear like So you hear that little like, and what's happening there is the size is automating. So it just makes it sound like the room is shrinking on itself. Um, and then even though it's coming back up here, it's bypassed, so it really stops. It stops like that. Um, and then the lexicon, um, it actually, I don't know why I put a vocal plate on it. It just sounded cool. And then a little bit of wider and some slight band passing on there. But yeah, the auxes are really simple. Okay. I hope I explained everything about the lead synth. Because then on top of that, like, so this, um, you'll see there's a lot of edits. And that was something where even though I had the sound down, I was trying to figure out the arrangement. One way I get my arrangements is I use the markers in Pro Tools, so like intro, mix in, drop one, breakdown, drop two, and that just kind of helps me keep things organized. And if I put the grid to 1 bar, I usually try and keep things like, either 16 bars, 32 bars, just even increments. So now let's go down to the effects. And yeah, so that is it's just like a sample, and it's going to the black hole and a little bit of delay, and I think there might be one section where it's going to the tape delay. Oh no, so the tape delay, I have the automation in there, but I guess I ended up not using it. And all that's happening there is a little bit of compression. And again, with the wider plugin, I feel like I kind of went overboard, honestly, with this wider plugin, but I don't know, it just sounds cool. So, and other tracks that I'll do tutorials on, I don't think I went as crazy with that plugin. I think it was mostly this specific track. Okay, now, why is this track called Kashyyyk? Well, I was watching Star Wars, and it was the one where they go to the Kashyyyk planet. And I was like, well, I should try and sample a Wookiee. So earlier in the tutorial, I mentioned that website, freesound.org. And another sample I grabbed from there is a Wookiee sound. And I guess it's not like an official Star Wars Wookiee, but it sounds similar. So if I take off the plugins on that track, you get something like this. And, it's going to some reverb, but that's nothing crazy. So it's not too crazy of a sound. And honestly, in the track, you kind of have to listen for it, it's almost like a little Easter egg. Now, I threw the talk box on there, and that really added a lot of character. It just kind of made it more like throaty, I guess. Distortion to just beef it up. Let's zoom in. Distortion. So you hear that little, like, I don't know, it just adds some edge to it. A little bit of compression, I think, just to tame it. But again, see, I always compress pretty lightly. It's not going crazy. And then, for sake of example, let me mute that reverb real quick. And I added a spring reverb. And a lot of times for like effects type of sounds, I'll use a spring reverb. Especially when it's a mono track. Like spring reverbs always sound really good in mono, unlike other reverbs. So this one, yeah. So it just adds like a little tail to it. And then of course, it's going to the main reverb, or the big reverb. And yeah, like, let's hear that in the track. Yeah, so I think it only comes in two spots. Yeah. So then, okay, 808, right? That would be the next track. Now, these 808s, I think I got these from my buddy Jamil, which he's actually on the mixtape. I did the anti-techno interlude with him. Shout out to Finesse Dios out in the Bahamas. And I'm pretty sure he gave me this 808. Now, this one, again, let's take off the plugins. There we go. So you'll see it says verify right here. So again, that's just this plugin. It's doing a little tape stop, and again, same thing like gross beats kind of in FL Studio. Which side note, FL Studio, because I know like shout out to Jamil, that kid in FL Studio is like a wizard. Like that program is so confusing to me. I don't know how people make music in it, to be honest with you. Um, okay, so the processing on this, right? Let's hear the raw sound. So it's pretty deep. And again, another thing, I use this 808 because it's at G sharp key of the track. Just keep things consistent. So I beefed it up with one of my favorite distortions. Right. Oh, and you know what? Let me mute that tape delay real quick. Yeah, so beefed it up like that, and then made it more stereo with the chorus, right? But stereo to the point where you kind of hear it. It's like almost like folding a little bit on itself. More distortion. Nothing crazy. You'll see that's only at 1 dB, so it's not doing too much. Again, my FX, I like to use a spring reverb. And yes, this one is stereo, but it still sounds cool with a spring reverb. And what that's doing is it's sending it back in the mix. I didn't want this 808 to be super forward. And sometimes I'll do that. Like with a spring reverb, usually the intention is just to send it a little bit back without having it like swimming in reverb. And then I cut out the subs of it because it just doesn't need it. There's already so much bass in the track. And that also kind of sends it back a little bit. Again, the wider plugin, I went absolutely nuts with this plugin. And then on top of that, the Kramer channel strip, and it's just boosting the top and the mids, because just to help it cut through a little bit. And then the tape delay. So yeah, that one. What I'll do a lot when I'm producing, and I think there's only one 808 in this. It's only in that one spot, but usually like when I'm arranging, right? So the break is right here. To kind of like signal to the listener that the break is coming, a good way to do that is just with like a bass or bass sounding element that is similar to the bass in the track, but it's not. Like, it's like different enough that it's like a trigger almost, and it signals like, okay, this is a different section. And on the other tracks I'll do tutorials of, I actually use more 808s. But that one was more just like, I don't know, just a little ear candy. Now this little buzz, and this is definitely a rhythmic part of the track. So it even comes in the first bit. Now the buzz comes from when I was making that synthesizer, the lead synth. I had another version of it that I scrapped, and I think you'll see like possible lead bass, possible render tone lead. So I'll sometimes like try out sounds and scrap them, but I'll keep, if there's like a little bit of it that I like, I'll keep it and trim it. And that's what I did here. I just liked how this one part of it sounded. So I trimmed it and then just put it here. And I think if we go to the grid, it comes in, it's like, it's like a 16th note after the initial. And all that's doing is it's just a little buzz. It's like a rhythmic element. So like, and Yeah, so that comes in even intervals. It stops for certain parts just to keep that minimalness going, and then it comes back. But yeah, that one, um, same thing. Just it's boosting a little bit on the mids and the lows, and just some volume adjustment on the channel strip. Um, and honestly, that's pretty much the track. It's much more simple than some of my older material, and that's kind of where I'm trying to go with things. Is less is more, and maybe that's why I gravitate towards minimal techno. It's like that meme where it's like you get nothing, and minimal techno fans are just going crazy. Um, so I'm trying to think of like other notes on this track. One thing I'll do when I'm producing, like trying to get the groove down, um, I'll throw an EQ on the master's channel, and I'll actually just listen to the bottom 100 hertz. Um, when I'm designing bass and like drums and whatnot, or bass drums and that kind of stuff, I try to imagine how. So like, let's say you're in the warehouse, right? And then you go to the outside part of the warehouse, and you can still, the building's still shaking. But I try to imagine like how is the building shaking? Like only those lower frequencies are coming through. Like does that still have a rhythm to it? Um, and so I'll like I'll play just the bass, and I'll try and imagine if I'm standing outside the club or something, if that still has some bounce to it, and at least go in the right direction. Um, and then I do have this like Maxim plugin. I don't really use this. Like if I'm bouncing the track to listen to like a demo of it in my car or something like that, I'll throw this on. Sometimes when I'm producing, I'll throw this on and like mix into it. But it's not something I use like when I go to the studio. This is inactive because there's no reason to mix into a limiter all the time. It is helpful. Just it's helpful to see like because when I'm in the studio and I'm mixing, I'll use usually like the overstayer or like an SSL style um, master bus compression. So it kind of emulates like what it potentially could sound like going into a harder, more like general compressor. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like anything else I didn't cover. Um, Go check out the mixtape, Techno Mixtape 2. It's on Spotify, SoundCloud. Shout out to 6 a.m. group for the premiere on SoundCloud. There's also a little article about it. Um, yeah, definitely on this video, smash that like button, Falcon Punch that subscribe button. But yeah, I'll definitely be posting more tutorials. Thank you guys for checking this out today. Any questions, just type those down in the comments. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at tapnewo, TAPNEWO. Instagram, tapnewo techno, TAPNEWO TECHNO. And yeah, DM me, hit me up, tweet me, whatever. I'm always down to chat, always down to share more insight. Um, send me promos. My email is tapnewomusic@yahoo.com. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you guys have a great day.